back in the day now with Trevor Kavanagh, who was a political editor of the Sun newspaper, and he worked for the Daily Mirror over in Australia. Spent a little bit of time back in the day there, and also one of the most influential media men just a few years ago, Trevor. But you've seen some big changes in the media throughout the past 40, 50, dare I say 60 years. How's it changed over that time?
65, I think.
65.
It's changed enormously. I mean, not only is there a totally different process of producing newspapers, which took a revolutionary turn with the move into whopping by Rupert Murdoch back in the early 80s. Yeah. But then the development of the internet, social media, and Google. I mean, Google killed the newspaper industry, basically. And that, about 20 odd years ago, people began to get their news first and foremost on their breakfast table from their laptops, not from a rolled up newspaper coming through the letterbox.
So you've covered many a general election, and we've seen in the past, possibly the Sun newspaper sort of had on their front page on the day before the election or the same day as the election, vote Conservative. I think actually back in 97, it might have been 97, where they said vote Labour. Yeah. They do have a massive influence on politics, newspapers.
I think that has changed to some extent, obviously, simply because of the decline in circulation and the power of the press to involve the readers. The readers are the powerful, the power behind any newspaper. We had more than 4 million readers a day at one point. Yeah. And that has dwindled substantially since then. So clearly the two things go together. If you've got a big readership, then politicians respond to their views. And our proud boast on the Sun is that we're pretty much in touch with our readers.
You used to see people in the morning, Trevor, go into the local paper shop, get the pint of milk and the newspaper, packet of fags on the way to work, and they'd be sat in their work vans or whatever, reading the Sun or the Daily Mail, whatever newspaper they read. But now it's the phone. Yeah. And people, and I accuse people or journalists of being lazy sometimes, cut and paste journalists. But I think as readers sometimes we're a little bit lazy. We just read the headlines, the paper's got the click, and they've got the hits on Twitter or Facebook or whatever, and they're on the way.
That's right, and I think that the passing traffic, which is the sort of core of our readership, people who see the headline on the top half of the folded newspaper on the racks, they have disappeared since COVID, basically. Yeah. COVID killed that other part of our passing traffic trade. I think that we are naturally inclined to take our news based on the headline and the first paragraph. Yeah. Yeah. We might get as far as the third paragraph, but most people don't go much further than that. It's a real test, actually, of a story's power if they get right to the end. And
the local papers have suffered as well, because in my local paper, and I don't like mentioning it because they're not very nice to me, but my local paper used to be free, and that would go to, I don't know, maybe 100,000 houses locally in 3 different constituencies. But the one thing they don't do now, which used to pay for the paper, was adverts, was for cars, was for houses, used to have situations vacant in there. So all these different organisations would be advertising, the cars and whatever, but that revenue's gone now because, again, smartphone on there, you can literally buy a new car on your phone within 5 minutes.
Absolutely, that's our lifeblood, that's our revenue stream gone up in smoke. And we now have a situation where the social media giants, Google and Facebook and so on, they gobble up about 85+% of the advertising revenue worldwide. Yeah. So we're left with a tiny fragment which we share among ourselves, which is not enough really to man a newspaper with the sort of staff you need to cover in depth the stories that deserve to be covered. And one of the big casualties of this is those local newspapers that you discussed. There was a time when everyone got their local news from their local newspaper, which they read from cover to cover. They learned about planning applications, they learned about court cases, about county court cases. None of that appears anymore. People do not man, newspapers do not cover all of those things anymore.
It's
so
true.
You know nothing about what's going on in your locality.
No, it's true that is, because you used to get your national newspapers for your national news, your politics, your football, your sport, whatever. Even in our local on a Saturday night, we used to get what's called the Football Post. We used to get, you go to the football match, and by the time you got home or got to a local pub and got a pint in front of you and a packet of scratchings, there'd be a bloke come round with a big satchel, Football Post there, and you'd be reading all the football results, because that was probably the only time, or the first time of the day, when you could actually find out all the other football results. And that was great back in the day, but is that ever going to come back, Trevor?
No, it'll never come back. And I think that what we're losing is not just newspapers, which is a great shame. It's for sort of core democracy, because it's at that level, local newspapers, where democracy begins. You know what your local authorities are doing.
Yeah.
You know whether the sort of residents' associations that represent some councils are really representing people that they're supposed to represent. Nowadays, you don't know who your councillors are. You certainly don't know on a broader scale who your MEPs were. So that sort of hands-on touch of direct contact between politicians and the electors has gone.
And also, you used to get good, juicy gossip out the local paper as well. So-and-so's been done for drunk driving, or he's been caught shoplifting, or, you know, stuff like that. And the old curtains would be twitching. There'd be women out on the street, you know, spreading gossip. And you'd have the secretary of the rumour committee on the corner of the street, you know, who's read the local paper and you know, telling all and sundry about what him at number 22 has been up to. So we've lost all that as well.
We have. And I used to work on a local newspaper where the staff was bigger than in some national newspapers. A weekly newspaper with a whole bench of sub-editors and reporters in district offices. And we would cover events which we would then send up to Fleet Street, to the nationals. And the challenge was to turn a local story into a national story. And that's how the flow of information used to go, and it doesn't anymore. It's all gossip on Twitter.
And unfortunately, because like news is so instant these days, and sometimes, and they get caught out doing this, some of these newspapers get caught out online on Twitter or Facebook by rushing to get a headline. And sometimes politicians get caught out with it as well. I have certainly in the past, where you've seen something and you think, well, I want to get that out like just quickly and get all the clicks, and you know, be the star of the web today. But it can be a dangerous game sometimes, that can, spreading this information.
I think it can, and we as journalists can also get caught out, because we need to file instantly as things are happening. And you can put your foot in it in a way you just didn't know you were doing until suddenly it blows up in your face, and it's a hornet's nest that you've suddenly disturbed, and they're all around you, and you're paying a big price.
But the internet is here to stay, Trevor. It's not going anywhere. People are glued to their phones, and it is a little bit sad that people aren't going into the paper shop and picking up that magazine or picking up that newspaper, you know. And I guess young people now are being, you know, born into a society where you don't buy newspapers. You just look on your phone. We see children in restaurants with their families on the tablets, on the phone. You see a family of 6 people there around a table, nobody talking to each other, and they're all getting their little bits of info of the phone. Is it sort of killing society in that respect, do you think?
Well, I think it is, and I keep thinking, well, you know, vinyl records are making a comeback. Maybe one day newspapers will make a comeback. But I think that we're now attuned to getting our gratification, whatever it happens to be, from that thing in your hand. From the TV, not even the TV anymore. I think mostly it's tablets and phones. And I think that also that shrinks people's relationships with one another, because they're not talking to one another. Families aren't, as you say, talking to one another around the dinner table. They're looking at their phones, and I think that's
But it doesn't help. We spoke about Singapore earlier, and I was in a few of their restaurants last week, and they didn't even have a menu, some of the bars. You had to scan a QR code.
That's right.
And order your meal and put your card details in. I'm thinking, I don't want to do that. I want to speak to somebody. I want to ask them what that meal's like, how many bits of fish you get on that plate, and it's sort of spoiling the whole thing. It's stopping people talking to each other.
And just wait for artificial intelligence.